Hello, watching L24 Midnight News Edition, and to the headlines. President of the Republic, Mr. Abdelmajid Tebboune, declared that Algeria will continue to ensure all the conditions to promote investment and improve business climate in the country. Gaza militants fired rockets and Zionists carried out airstrikes on Friday as tensions soared following a Zionist raid in the occupied West Bank that killed 9 Palestinians. In yet another provocative act on Friday, a far-right Danish politician burned a copy of the Muslim holy book of Quran in front of a mosque in Denmark. Despite differences over the approaches to be taken on how to bring charges and gather evidence, the EU wants quick justice for the horrific crimes committed in Ukraine. And in the African 2022 Championship CHAN, Algeria, the host, defeated Côte d'Ivoire 1-0 and clinched a place in the semi-finals. Hello again. In a speech at the opening of an international forum, the Algerian President Abdelmajid Tebboune, by the voice of his advisor in charge of legal affairs, Bou'lam, the head of the state, declared that Algeria will continue to ensure all the conditions and all the means to promote investment, improve and protect the business climate in the country for the benefit of Algerian and foreign investors, stressing that investment is one of the strategic priorities. The proceedings of the preparatory meetings for the 70th session of Conference of the Parliamentary Union of Member States of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation continued Friday behind closed doors here in Algiers at the committee level to examine the situation of Muslim minorities in the world, the rights of women and children, and to review the Union's foreign policy.
Today also we have the political committee of the Parliamentary Union of Islamic Countries. We discuss about the most important issues in Muslim world. One of them was the impact of the Ukraine war through the food security for the Islamic countries. Also, we discuss about the other issues that was important. There was some suggestion from our brothers from Algeria.
We ask for international community and including from this POIC to convey a very strong condemnation message to the world, because now we can see that there's some double standard when it comes to Palestinian issue. If we compare with the Ukrainian, for example, there is a double standard and also hypocrisy from the Western world especially. So we condemn the killing of Palestinian people.
In a statement released yesterday, the Algerian Foreign Ministry said that Algeria strongly condemns the bloody massacre that Zionist occupation have committed in Palestine. The statement added that Algeria calls on the international community to intervene urgently against those responsible for the heinous crime and the series of repeated attacks against the Palestinian people. At dawn on Friday, the Zionist army bombed the site for the Palestinian factions in the Gaza Strip, without any injuries reported. Hussein Burkan on What Follow.
Zionists carried out strikes on the Gaza Strip on Friday after occupiers' operations that killed 10 Palestinians in the West Bank. The Zionist army has announced that it has carried out at least 2 rounds of strikes against the Gaza Strip. No casualties were reported. The explosions particularly affected Gaza City. Hamas military wing claimed to have retaliated with anti-aircraft batteries and surface-to-air missiles.
There is no security, there is fear and anxiety. Because we have war here every time to time, whatever happens in West Bank, A war starts here, on the border in Gaza. There is no stability, no security, no life in Gaza.
Shops were closed and streets were largely empty in the Gaza Strip, as residents expressed their fear of an escalation in violence.
We live in anxiety and fear. We hear bombings, we start to run. The aim of every new Zionist government, these radical right-wing governments, is to kill the Palestinian people. The violence is everywhere, especially against the Palestinians, here in Gaza, Jenin, and other places in the West Bank.
On Thursday, 9 Palestinians were killed in Jenin in a raid described by the Zionist army as an operation against Islamic activists in the refugee camp of the city in the northern of the occupied West Bank. A 10th Palestinian was shot dead Thursday in Ramallah. Overall, this is the deadliest episode in the Zionist-Palestinian conflict since the outbreak of the violence between the occupier army and Islamic Jihad in Gaza, during which at least 49 Palestinian civilians, including children, had perished in 3 days in August 2022. The Palestinian Authority has denounced the massacre and announced that it will end security cooperation with the Zionists, a first since 2020.
In same line of thought, UN Security Council held a closed consultation session on the situation in the occupied Palestinian territories. Council session will include a briefing by the UN Special Coordinator for the Middle East peace process for Tor Winsland. The Palestinian delegate to the United Nations, Riyad al-Mansour, announced that Palestine had called for an emergency session of the Security Council regarding the Zionist aggression on Jenin Thursday, which left 10 martyrs. And to have a better understanding of the latest Zionist escalation in the West Bank, I'm joined live by Mr. Hamoud Salhi, an Associate Dean of International Education at California University from United States. Mr. Hamoud Salhi, hello there. Thank you so much for the time given.
My pleasure.
First, Mr. Hamoud, as a direct question, why is the Zionist occupation escalating its crime at this particular time? Is this related to the outcome of the November elections in which the most extremist government in the history of the entity came to power again, or because the UN Security Council recently condemned their actions in favor of Palestinians?
It's both of those factors, but a factor that seems to be ignored is the fact that there are serious challenges inside the Jewish states. The laws or some of the rules or some of the attempts on the current government, the right-wing government, to overrule them. Remember, the Prime Minister Netanyahu was indicted. This government wants to change the regulations of the Israeli court. These internal factors are a big thing to consider. These latest attacks on Jenin and previously what we've seen in the mosque in Jerusalem are designed to divert the attention of public opinion, or Israelis in particular, from internal serious challenges to the external by doing what they are doing. And then, the reality is that this government and the right wing has an agenda that clearly is Zionist. It is an agenda that doesn't recognize the Palestinians. It believes in taking over of the West Bank. Those are facts that they have not been shy about them, and they have been acting in that direction.
I'm sorry to cut you train of thought, Mr. Hamoud Salhi, but simply, what are the implications of the Palestinian Authority's decision to stop the Security Coordination Agreement?
From an Israeli perspective, this arrangement that was established since the Oslo agreement was to create conditions for peace and continuing to lay the foundation for mutual understanding of both sides, developing confidence measures, and more than anything else, create conditions for the movement of Palestinians around the areas. Action like this, and we have to note that this arrangement has not been taken seriously by the Israelis. Actions like this will impact the security in those areas. But more than anything else, it's also what the Palestinians have done, also underscore that they are no longer accepting this attack without just responding, without doing anything. But we have actions in the Security Council. We also have the various factions more united, and thanks, this is particularly to what happens to Algeria, when the Palestinians have decided to bring their house in order. So there is a huge application, and as we should expect, there will be some kind of escalations. And what we're hearing from the various organizations, that the Palestinians are united and they will retaliate. What that means is very important to consider, that there has to be some kind of a solution to this cause, and the Israelis have to stop, particularly this right-wing government.
Mr. Hamoud Salhi, you joined us live from United States. Thank you ever so much for your precious explanation.
Thank you.
Now moving on to the continent of Africa, Abdoulaye Diop, Minister for Foreign Affairs and Cooperation in Mali, reaffirmed Friday during a Security Council session that the Malian government's commitment to the Peace and Reconciliation Agreement originated from the Algerian process.
Regarding the Peace and Reconciliation Agreement emanated from the Algerian process, which has been the subject of a great debate in this Council, I wish to solemnly reaffirm the Malian government's commitment here to unequivocally continue with the rigorous implementation of this agreement, because we remain convicted that this is absolutely paramount for lasting stability in our country.
The Spanish non-governmental organization Caminando Fronteras accused both Rabat and Madrid of preventing the families of migrants who were victims of the Melilla massacre from knowing the fate of dozens of missing persons in order to evade responsibility for the horrific crime. The organization specialized in defending the rights of immigrants mentioned in its report the loss of contact with 77 African migrants since last June, while the families of the victims are still questioning the official statistics provided by Spain and Morocco. Hundreds of people gather for the funeral of the 6 killed in the attack on the 2 churches in the southern Spain. As the investigation continues, a priest was also seriously injured in this attack, which hit 2 churches a few hundred meters apart in the port city in the southern Spain, located opposite the Moroccan coast. The Minister of Foreign Affairs said that Thursday evening that the suspect, a 25-year-old Moroccan who was arrested immediately after the attack, has never been under a radar of National Service for Radicalization in Spain or neighboring countries. Now in Europe, in another provocative act, the far-right Danish politician burned a copy of Muslim Holy Book of Quran in front of mosque in Denmark. The incident took place days after a leader of the Danish far-right party, Stram Kurs, burned a copy of the Quran outside the Turkish embassy in Stockholm on Saturday under police protection. Several thousands of people around the world took to the streets to condemn the act of Quran burning by a far-right Danish activist in Sweden. The act has sparked anger as well as condemnation from many governments. Nabil Khazini.
Their countries might be different, their languages too. But all of these crowds from around the world poured into the streets in several countries for one aim, shouting one word: the Quran is our holy book and we are here to protect it. Their anger is a result of the burning of a copy of the Quran in the Swedish capital, Stockholm.
We are strongly condemning the act here. It is impossible for any Muslim to accept this. This is an attack against all Muslims.
Of course, the response to this act will be people gathering in squares, but it is obvious that the proper reaction must come at a government level.
The stunt was carried out by Rasmus Paludan, a right-wing extremist with a reputation for conducting similar acts, with the last having been given a permit by the authorities. Precisely this is what saddened those taken to the streets, which is that some Western countries are tolerating Islamophobic demonstrations, and because Muslims are becoming easy targets of religious hatred.
Sweden must know the repercussion of this despicable act. We want them to act on the perpetrators.
Books are not always more than just carriers of writing. They most of the time symbolize something and have a place within a particular culture. For Muslims, their book, the Quran, is a symbol of their faith that must be respected.
The Swedish Foreign Minister said Friday that his country has met Turkish conditions for accession to NATO and is close to a point where the Turkish parliament could start the ratification process. Earlier this week, Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan postponed accession talks indefinitely, and he said that Sweden is not sticking to an agreement reached last June with Turkey and fellow applicant Finland.
Well, we have an agreement that was signed during the summit of Madrid, a trilateral memorandum signed by Sweden, by Finland and by Turkey. It is very clear, it is open, it is not secret in any way. It lays down clear conditions that needs to be met by all parties, and we have constantly, ever since the memorandum was signed, done our best to fulfill all the commitments. We believe that we have done so, and we are close to the point when the Turkish parliament should be able to start the ratification.
Still in Sweden, but this time in a different matter, EU Justice Ministers met on Friday in the Swedish capital Stockholm to discuss effective justice measures for the horrific crimes in Ukraine war. Mohammed Kato.
EU Justice Ministers said that the European Union wants swift accountability for horrific crimes in Ukraine, even as they diverged over the methods in a debate about how to bring prosecutions, seek evidence, or fund war damage repairs. Sweden's Justice Minister Gunnar Stormer stressed the importance of holding the crime's perpetrators accountable.
I think it's both realistic and I think that's the only way to go. Nobody that is doing this kind of war crimes shall be go free. It's very, very important that we will find a way to hold responsible people accountable.
For his part, EU Justice Commissioner Didier Reynders underlined that discussions were needed not only with EU member states but also with international partners.
We don't have a preferred option. We need to have a very important international backing for the final solution. So what we try to do is to have a real discussion not only with the member states but also with international partners to be sure that we have a very good support for the final proposal that we will put on the table.
The ministers discussed collecting evidence as well as setting up a new international tribunal to prosecute Moscow's military operation. Irish Justice Minister Simon Harris said accountability was a must and should absolutely be applied. Meanwhile, to pay for the damage, the EU is also considering using Russian assets frozen under sanctions. Moscow, which says it is conducting a special military operation in Ukraine, has denied deliberately attacking civilians or committing other war crimes.
Following a similar decision by Latvia earlier this week, Russian Foreign Ministry said on Friday it had ordered Latvia's envoy to leave the country within 2 weeks. The ministry said it had summoned the Latvia charge d'affaires to protest over Riga's decision to downgrade relations with Russia. A man armed with Kalashnikov-style rifles stormed the Azerbaijani embassy in Iran's capital on Friday, killing the head of the security at the diplomatic post and wounding 2 guards. A statement from Azerbaijani Foreign Ministry said that an investigation is currently underway into the treacherous attack. Meanwhile, Iran condemned the attack. The incident comes amid increased tensions between Azerbaijan and Iran after Baku appointed its first ever ambassador to Zionists this month.
As a ministry, we demand from the Iranian side to bring the perpetrators of this terrorist act into justice as soon as possible, since Iran, as a side who accept the embassies, has an obligation, according to the Vienna Convention on Diplomatic Relations, to secure and to provide the safety of the embassies. And the embassy security obligation directly lies on Iranian shoulders.
Senior Czechs headed to polls on Friday to make their choice between a former army chief and a billionaire ex-prime minister for a country's next president. Former General Peter Pavel, a mainstream pro-Western candidate back in aid for Ukraine, held the commanding poll lead over his rival Andrei Babis as voting began at 2 p.m.
I voted for Andrei Babis. I'm from Prohinus. He's my neighbor, and I was in the army for 2 years. And I don't like the army officers.
I voted for General Pavel because, how to say it politely, because I'm looking forward to finally having a president we can be proud of.
President Joe Biden named former COVID police coordinator Jeff Zients as the next chief of staff on Friday, refreshing a key role as Biden prepares a likely re-election bid and faces a probe of his handing of classified documents. Ron Klain, Biden's current chief of staff, will take part in an official transition event next week, according to the White House statement. In Latin America, hundreds of anti-government protesters took to the streets of Lima, facing police in riot gear and tear gas aimed at worst wave of protests in at least 2 decades in the Andean country. Protesters demanding the resignation of President Dina Boluarte, early new elections, the shutdown of Congress, and the new constitution. Following the protest, Boluarte considered moving up general elections to December of 2023.
There is more blockade, more violence. We discussed it with the Justice Ministry and Prime Minister, and now it's up to them to take a decision on this draft law, in line with the electoral process, which provides for moving up elections to December 2023.
To the African tournament, in an opening round of the knockout stage of the African home-based players tournament, the hosts, our national football team Algeria, defeated Côte d'Ivoire 1-0 thanks to a late penalty by the midfield Ayman Mahyouz. Mahyouz scored a penalty kick in the 96th minute of the game to advance Algeria to the semi-finals. The winner in the semi-final match opposing Ghana to Niger, or rather to Niger, will play Algeria on Tuesday. And on the other game, from Algiers to the capital to Annaba, eastern part of the country, where the second semi-final between Senegal and Mauritania took place, Teranga Lions, Senegal edged West African neighbors Mauritania 1-0 in another quarter-final decided by a penalty scored at the 34th minute. To this end, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for being with us. For more updates, you can follow our social media platform. And for now, all I can say, take care of yourself. Good night.